Since the end of the Cold War, the Chinese regime has been trying to portray itself as a responsible player for global peace. Since the war against Ukraine broke out, China has appeared as surprised as everybody else. Chinese diplomats have called on all sides to exercise restraint and even offered to help negotiate a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia due to concerns for civilian casualties. But is the Chinese regime really an innocent third party, as it wants the world to believe?
And I think the Chinese have been complicit. I think they have supported a war criminal in a naked war of aggression against an innocent state.
Ian Easton, senior director at the Project 2049 Institute, shared a similar message on Twitter. He wrote, "The Chinese Communist Party is a collaborator, an enabler, and complicit in the Russian invasion of Ukraine." At first glance, this may seem like an overstatement, but reports from Russia and China suggest he may have a point. The New York Times reported on Wednesday that Chinese officials told their Russian counterparts not to invade Ukraine until after the Beijing Winter Olympics. That's according to an intelligence report cited by the New York Times. And last Friday, the newspaper quoted U.S. officials as saying they shared intelligence about Russia's military actions around Ukraine over the 3 months before the full-on invasion. Washington reportedly asked the Chinese regime to help persuade Russia not to invade. China then brushed off the concerns, but then turned around and told the Russians what U.S. officials had said. Now, as the Russians continue to shell Ukraine facilities, causing civilian deaths, the Chinese regime has announced it will not join other nations in sanctioning Russia. Instead, it will maintain normal trade and financial relations with Russia. That's as China's foreign ministry spokesperson repeatedly blasted the U.S. and its allies for what he called illegal unilateral sanctions against Russia. He also accused the U.S. of being a culprit in the crisis and of heightening tensions, creating panic, and even hyping up the possibility of warfare. The Chinese regime may have also been helping soften the blow of Western sanctions on Russia. The day the full-scale invasion against Ukraine started, the Chinese regime officially confirmed it would open up to Russian wheat imports. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison denounced the regime for throwing Vladimir Putin a lifeline and undermining the sanctions. He described China's action as simply unacceptable. What's more, the Chinese regime also sided with Russia to reject a debate over Ukraine in the UN Human Rights Council. It later abstained from voting on a resolution condemning Russia for the invasion. But the most damning evidence seems to rip off the Chinese Communist Party's mask of innocence once and for all. Ironically, it comes from none other than the Russians themselves. According to a press release from the Russian embassy in China, Putin called Xi Jinping on February 25th, one day after the invasion began. The notice explains the two sides reaffirmed their willingness to further closely coordinate and support each other. They noted that the use of illegal sanctions to achieve the self-interested goals of individual countries must never be allowed. In light of this, the leaders of the two countries emphasized the importance of strengthening bilateral pragmatic cooperation, taking into account the results of their talks in Beijing on February 4th. The release suggests that China's Xi may have already known about the invasion and promised to help Putin soften the sanctions that might come as early as February 4th. Worth noting, the Chinese version of the release leaves out that date.